Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Just give me a wave. Hi, I'm Laura Arsenault with, I don't know who, Department of Planning and Development, Heritage Resources. We're going to go ahead and get started with the ARB meeting for August 13th, 2020. Just a quick reminder, let me see, where's my little caveats.
Hey Laura, real quick, Jason Zillman.
Mode if you're an attendee, and if you're a panelist, you can comment at any time.
Nicole, I'm in now.
If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it online by entering it in the Q&A panel. And if you're in the full screen view, click the question mark icon located on the floating toolbar. If you're in the split screen mode, the Q&A panel is already open and located at the lower right side of your screen. And as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. If you do have questions or technical difficulties, please put it in the chat bar or the question and answer, and we have someone standing by to help answer those questions and help us out. So with that, I will pass it over to Chairman Burns. John, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can they see me?
You.
Let me make sure I'm not muted.
I could hear you a moment ago, John, when you were talking.
Okay, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I got a yes. Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
You can. Okay. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. We need to begin these virtual ARB meetings with a series of motions to assure that we're complying with the state laws concerning Freedom of Information Act and equal access. And so you have to bear with us while we go through these motions. So we need to do this at the beginning of each of our ARB meetings. So, to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA, the ARB needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this ARB is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each ARB member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Okay. Member Michelle Aubrey?
Yes, I'm here and I am attending the meeting from my residence.
Thank you. Mr. Christopher Daniel?
Yes, Chairman Burns, I am here and I am attending from my home in Reston.
Okay. Ms. Samantha Huang?
Yes, I'm Samantha Huang, and from Reston, I can hear everyone very well.
Thank you. Mr. Stephen Kolensky?
Thanks. Hi, Mr. Klinsky is having trouble connecting. He'll be on in just a moment.
Okay, I will move along. Ms. Elise Murray?
I'm present from my residence in Vienna, Virginia.
Thank you. Ms. Susan Notkins?
I'm not seeing her on any of the participants or attendees list.
Okay, I thought that she was. Ms. Kate Orr?
I'm Kay Orr, and I am attending at my home in Alexandria.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Plumpy, who may be coming late. Or Joe, are you here yet?
I don't see Joe either, John.
Okay. And Mr. Jason Zellman.
I'm present at my home in Burke, Virginia.
Thank you, sir. I will go back. Mr. Klinsky, have you been able to join us?
Not yet, I don't think so, but we'll let you know when he gets popped on.
Okay. Nevertheless, I believe we do have a quorum. And so at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the vice chairman that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. Mr. Daniel, will you take the gavel, please?
I certainly will.
Okay. Now, I move that each member's voice is adequately heard by each other member of the ARB.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Ms. Orr, I believe. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, all those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Chairman, for the record, I believe Mr. Kalinsky has joined us.
Mr. Klinsky, are you there?
Here we go. Yes, I'm here, John. Thank you.
Okay. And looks like from your office in Alexandria.
Yes, from my office in Alexandria.
Okay. Right. So I'm hearing a noise that kind of sounds like an ocean in the background. I'm not sure. Someone has their mic open.
That was probably me. Sorry, the laptops that work gave us have a fan that runs constantly, so I'll make sure to turn that off.
Turn off the sound when you're not speaking. Don't turn off the fan because I don't want it to go out on you. Okay. This is the second motion. This is establishing a quorum. As determined by the roll call, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, me, 8. There are 8 members of the ARB present, and therefore to satisfy the minimum ARB quorum. The ARB bylaws state that a minimum of 6 members are required to determine a quorum. It is so moved.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zellman, I believe that time. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay. The third motion, the need for an electronic meeting. Third,
John?
having established. Yes?
John, can you, sorry, this is Laura. Can you hold on one second? I want to make sure the attendees can hear us. Because I got a
Okay.
message from one attendee that they were not able to hear us.
Hey, Laura.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I have 2 computers going. One is an attendee, and I hear you on the attendee computer.
Okay, great. All right. Just wanted to make sure. We'll help that one person then. Thank you.
May I proceed?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must now establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this ARB to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. As such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the ARB and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the ARB may conduct this meeting electronically through Webex, a county virtual meeting platform and available for access through the ARB county website or through telephone at 1-408-418-9388 with access code 129-124-3629. It is so moved.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Kalinsky. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Number 4, the need to dispense with FOIA's usual procedures to assure continuity in government and continue operations. Finally, it is next required that all the matters addressed on today's agenda are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
All right, the chairman has a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Ms. Murray. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Finally, public comments. The ARB needs to determine how long each member of the public will be able to speak during the public comment periods. The public will be allowed to comment after the consent agenda items and after each action item as is standard ARB practice. I move that each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
Second.
All right, it is seconded, I believe by Ms. Orr. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? It passes unanimously.
Okay. Now we can begin to move on. The next item on the draft agenda is the Webex information. Laura, do you have anything further to add on that?
Nope, I said what I needed to say earlier, but once again, if you have any questions or can't hear, please put it in the chat box or the Q&A function and we will help sort you out.
Okay, thank you. We traditionally start this meeting each month with a reading of the statement of purpose that establishes the authority, establishes historic overlay districts and gives us the authority to conduct our business tonight. And tonight, Ms. Kay Orr has very graciously agreed to read that for us. Ms. Orr?
The statement of purpose. Historic overlay districts are created for the purpose of promoting the general welfare, education, economic prosperity, and recreational pleasure of the public through the perpetuation of those general areas or individual structures and premises that have been officially designated by the Board of Supervisors as having historical, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance. Regulations within such districts are intended to protect against destruction of or encroachment upon such areas, structures, and premises to encourage uses which will lead to their continuance, conservation, and improvement in a manner appropriate to the preservation of the cultural, social, economic, political, archaeological, or architectural heritage of the county, to prevent creation of environmental influences adverse to such purposes, and to assure that new structures and uses within such districts will be in keeping with the character to be preserved and enhanced.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. I appreciate that. The next item of business coming up is approval of the agenda. We have an agenda that Laura has distributed to all of us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have
Excuse
motion.
me, John.
Yes.
Let's
get it on the floor, please. Yeah, can we have a second to the motion first, then we can discuss?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, now discussion. Ms. Murray.
Item number 3 on the agenda, ARB 20-LFK01, the proposal for new construction at the Langley Ordinary, is not complete, so that it does not include architectural drawings, so that it cannot be approved tonight. So I would suggest that we either defer it or make it a workshop item.
Okay, so we have a proposal to modify the agenda. Is there someone who will second that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Daniels seconded that motion. Okay, now we have a motion to modify the agenda I'm not certain, are we going to, is the motion to move it to a workshop item, or to defer? What is the pleasure of the maker of the motion?
The maker of the motion doesn't know what is fair, so she left it. She didn't make it as a motion. She made it as a comment.
Okay, thank you. May I ask, Laura, could you enlighten us a little bit more about why this issue came up?
Sure. The applicant submitted some items, and we found out late today that we didn't think it was complete, which is up to the discretion of the board. So the applicant has agreed to defer until next month.
Okay, okay. So then is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, I move that the Architecture Review Board defer our ARB 20-LFK01 till a future date.
Okay, is that acceptable to the seconder of the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to confer with my amendment creator that in addition to deferring it, that the ARB is instructing our staff to work with the applicant to make sure whatever materials might be missing are provided to us the next application, so that we don't have to do this again, because I think we would like to review this application in the future.
I agree.
It's more direction
Okay.
for staff, but as part of that motion, that staff work with the applicant to ensure we get the right package for next month.
Okay, so that resolves the one issue regarding ARB 20-LFK-01. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? Okay, hearing one, I will call approval of the motion that the agenda is approved.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe our original approver of the agendas have to accept our amendment.
Good point.
I accept the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Okay, okay. And who was the seconder on that?
That was me. I also accept.
Okay, okay, so we're in good shape that way. Okay. Then I will call the question that approval of the agenda is dependent on deferral of action item 2, ARB 20-LFK-01, with the approval of the applicant until a future time, and with instruction for staff to provide counsel so that when the application comes back to us, it is full and complete and easily able to be reviewed. So all in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, we have an agenda. Laura, are there guests or staff you want to introduce tonight?
Not prepared. I think we have a couple staff related to some and the comprehensive sign plan amendment and Lorton respond to suitor, but I don't think, I'm trying to get my controls here and look at the attendees list. I think everybody else is related to one of the items tonight, and if you're not, just raise your hand or send us a quick note and we will recognize you. Okay, Mr. Burns, I do not see anyone, so please go ahead.
Okay. The first action item tonight is the consent calendar. The consent calendar has one item. It is ARB 16-CTV-02, amendment proposal for modifications of previously ARB approved signage at 13848A Lee Highway, Centerville, at tax map 054-4/01, lot 30, in the Centerville Historic Overlay District. Since this is a consent item, we do not need a presentation by the applicant. Is there a motion to approve the consent action item?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Daniel made the motion. Is there a second?
No, I hadn't made a motion, but I can make it.
Okay, sorry. I thought that's what you meant when you said.
No, I meant to make I went to get your attention.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB recommend approval of the following consent item as submitted for the August 13th, 2020 ARB meeting. ARB 16-CTV-02 amendment proposal for modifications to previously ARB approved signage Alibaba cell repair. Upon review, the materials of the proposals are found to meet the requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
Okay, now, is there a second?
I'd be happy to second that, Mr. Burns.
Okay, Mr. Klinsky made the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor of approval of ARB 16-CTB-02 as presented in the consent action item, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing no nays, the motion carries. And next action item then is would have been number 2, but that has been deferred. The next item is ARB 20-LOR-04, proposal for phase 2C site plan improvements for a parking lot located in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area. Tax map numbers 107-1 09. This is a project for which I need to recuse myself. And so, Mr. Daniel, I will pass the gavel to you for this. And I think the next 3 items through item number 6.
All right, sir, I will take the gavel from you and we will summon you to return as required.
And I will turn off my camera and
all right. As the chairman pointed out, the next 3 items on our next 4 items on our agenda all relate to the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area, ARB-20-LOR-04, 05, 06, and 07. Mr. Jim Perry of Elm Street Development is going to represent the proposals. I will obviously, Laura, let you set up some of this stuff. And since each one of these is an individual proposal, obviously, I know Mr. Perry, hopefully you can hear me, that you'll probably want to do a collective presentation. We will then probably need to work through approving them individually, though. So we may want to keep that in mind as we start moving through these items.
Great. This is Jim Perry with Elm Street Development. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jim, definitely. We can hear you.
Great. Good evening. It's good to be here this evening. Thank you for this opportunity. We're here this evening to seek your approval for 4 items for the commercial portions of the Laurel Hill project. All 4 of these items have been before you in work sessions the last 2 months. As Chris mentioned, probably most efficient if we go through the presentation. And at the end of that, we'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have about these items. I'll tell you right up front that we've made virtually no changes from when you saw it in July. So I will be brief in the presentation. The 4 items before you are highlighted on the screen. They include new architecture for the proposed Lidl grocery store on the east side of our north prison yard, the corresponding building, retail building on the west side, a new parking lot that occurs to the north of the wall, adjacent to the intersection of Silverbrook Road and White Spruce Way, and then a minor amendment to our comprehensive sign plan to provide some additional signage at the southern edge of the 2 southern subblock buildings. So these are the slides that you've seen before, just detailing those site plan improvements. So I'll just ask Aaron to step through those briefly. Next slide, please, Aaron. Next. Next. For the Lidl grocery store and the proposed retail building, I'm just going to ask Aaron to briefly scroll through the slides. These are slides that you've seen before. So these next 4 slides give you site sections. You can see they're couple of the sections are focused at the view from the intersection of White Spruce Way and Silverbrook Road. The other two sections are internal to the site, giving you a view back and forth across that parking lot. And then we have a series of slides that are just the 3D images that you've seen before. The fourth and final item is an amendment to our previously approved comprehensive sign plan that provides for some additional signage facing the southern parking lot. These signs would serve tenants that would occupy those southern 4 cell block buildings. So that concludes our presentation. I know I didn't add additional information, as again, the slides were unchanged. Be happy to answer any questions you might have or go back and look at anything else that might be of interest.
So, Jim, before we jump into member questions, I think I should set the tone of conversation, because I think a few of these we've already clearly indicated we have very little concern with. But obviously, recently the ARB was shared the letter from VDHR with Mark Homa's comments, and then Laura recently just shared with us your letter back to Mark Homa, copying Elizabeth Toone and the tax reviewer office concerning the retail space and grocery store space and VDHR's concerns with that design. Just for obvious, I think I wanted to give you a chance to talk about it. I also wanted to let the members know that I reached out to Mark Homa as well to speak with him briefly about his concerns that he voiced in the letter that was shared with us and was provided to Elm Street. Mr. Homa indicated that obviously this is his review that was provided, however, that he has coordinated that with Elizabeth Toone, and while the tax review office has not provided their comments back formally to Elm Street, that he indicated that there is a share of concern over what they would indicate as the incompatibility they see in the commercial structures and the grocery store. So I just wanted to let you know that I spoke to Mark briefly about that and let him know that obviously these designs had gone through us and that we had seen them. But before I say anything more about my thoughts on it, I wanted to just set that out there to let you all know that I reached out to him, and then obviously let Mr. Perry have a chance to talk about those comments that were provided and how they might affect the design and steps forward.
Sure. If I could, I would like to address the letter. And Aaron, if you could go to the next slide, I'd start to do that. So I'm assuming the board members have seen a copy of Mr. Homa's letter. Just the context of that letter, you may recall that there's a memorandum of understanding from 2001 when the property was transferred from the federal government to Fairfax County that provided that before the county ARB could act on any item, approve any item for the project, VDHR had to be given a chance to provide their comments on that action. So every action we bring to you, we have to submit to VDHR for their comment. So the way that works in Richmond is that the Office of Review and Compliance, Mr. Mark Homa, are the ones that make that review and make their comments. Quirk of the system, that office is not part of their formal review process and approval process for historic tax credits. And I'll speak to that in just a moment. And I will just point out that we've had several instances, at least a half a dozen, where we've had prior items that were approved by the ARB and the Office of Preservation Incentives in VDHR, where we got negative comments from Mr. Homa. All that, I'm just telling you fact that we've gotten negative comments from him on items that were approved both by this board and by the Office of Preservation Incentives, including in those few instances where we got VDHR approval prior to the ARB approval. So I already have VHDR approval in my hand, and I still got negative comments from Mr. Homa. So in terms of that formal review process for Laurel Hill, that is handled by the Office of Preservation Incentives, because they're the ones that administer the historic rehabilitation tax credits. And that review is usually coordinated with the National Park Service. So by the time it gets to them and they do the review, generally what we get back from them is a coordinated response from both BDHR, Office of Preservation Initiatives, and the National Park Service. The reviewer for this project is Ms. Elizabeth Toon. She is the director of the Office of Preservation Incentives. She has 4 staff reviewers, but she's been handling the Laurel Hill project personally for the last 8 years. We made a formal submission to Elizabeth on August 7th to initiate that formal review process. And as you can see, that was submitted the day after Mr. Homa wrote his letter. And I can tell you that the package we submitted to VDHR was much more comprehensive in terms of design details and a lot more material, a lot more narrative explaining why we thought it was compliant with the Secretary's standards. When we provided notice to Mr. Homa, we basically just gave him the elevations for the proposed improvements and compared them to the original architecture. We didn't have the same level of detail when we made that submission to him. So the package that went to Elizabeth is much more comprehensive than the one he commented on. And I will also share that when we first started talking to Lidl probably a year ago, I called Elizabeth to talk to her about it, and I told her who the grocery store operator was. It's Lidl. I told her that we're going to have to go in a contemporary architecture direction, and we had a good conversation about it. As a matter of fact, we actually went online and pulled up elevations for Lidl and talked about what might be appropriate, what might not be appropriate. And I asked her point blank if a contemporary architecture was appropriate. Could it be an improvement on the architecture for this site? And her reply was yes. She didn't make any commitments on details, but she encouraged us to keep going to see where that might lead. And I did ask her point blank, if you think contemporary architecture is off the table, please tell me now. And she told me that was not the case. So, and I haven't talked to her about it specifically since then because we've been working our way through this process with you guys. I also note that in keeping with your desires, we did have work sessions with you guys first before we made our formal submission to VDHR. So, and I would like to just provide a response to the letter, which is on the next slide. So, in our view, the proposed contemporary architecture is more distinguishable from the historic fabric of the surrounding historic resources and is therefore more compatible. I will point out that the townhouses in the community are also of contemporary design for the very same reason. Proposed mass scale and materials of the contemporary architecture are unchanged from the previous approvals and therefore remain compatible with the historic improvements. The composition of the proposed architecture features a much simpler mass and articulation than was previously approved. I give you some examples of that. There's no gables, there's no arches, there are no articulated parapets, there's no tower features, anything like that. There's a comment in Mr. Homa's letter about there being more glass. That's not the case. The glass is virtually the same today as it was proposed previously for the grocery store. There is a slight increase in the glass in the retail building, about 8%. We think that's an improvement because it makes it a more transparent front elevation. Also point out that the proposed buildings feature a simpler footprint and more consistent rhythm of windows, which again, we think is a more sympathetic treatment to the historic improvements. There's another comment in the letter about no vocabulary between the new and the old, pointing out that we do have some visual elements that connect the two buildings or the new buildings with the old buildings. So long answer to your question, Mr. Daniels. I have no doubt that Mr. Homa and Ms. Toon were in communication when he wrote his letter. I would point out that she now has a comprehensive package in front of her, which explains to her why we think what we're proposing is appropriate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Perry. I wanted to give you a chance to talk to those items before we went to board members and any questions came to you, just because I have a feeling it was going to come up as one of the first topics. Before we get to members of the board for any questions, and then obviously if there is a motion after that, are there any members of the public, Laura, that have any comments that they want to provide on this item for action? And have we had communications?
Let me check real quick. I think that they're just people for the next item.
Okay.
And staff. So I think we're all set.
All right. Well, then I would look to board members for questions, and I'll go. I think I'll just do as John does, and I'll go down the list of folks that are here, putting each of you on the spot as appropriate. Starting with Ms. Albury.
Sure. And a question for you. Do you want me to just talk about ask questions or give comment on the first item or all four of them?
I think I'm comfortable at the moment for us doing questions on any of the items.
Okay,
And then after that, I will look to motions to the members for individual items as appropriate.
perfect. Because in my case, I have no questions or comments on any of the four items. I mean, I raised questions earlier in earlier meetings and all of my concerns were addressed. I will say I am currently unfamiliar with and have never received a copy of the August 6th letter from Mark Holma. So perhaps it was not as widely distributed as you thought. But as far as the four items on the agenda for Laurel Hill, I'm good to go for voting on them at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Ms. Wan?
Yes. I still have a little bit to try to process this design. I have no problem with the contemporary design, and I think the black metal and the glass are really handsome. The only thing I kept asking myself, is that the right direction? Is the brick color? It's so contrast to the existing building surrounding. It kind of a really bold move to go to that direction. However, I seem understand why it's moving toward that way. That is my only comment.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wan. Mr. Kalinsky?
All right, Mr. Daniel, thank you. I think, you know, we've had a lot of deliberation on this. I think the sign package is well thought out, organized, and works well. I think the communication between both the Lytle and the retail building is well worked out, and I think it's a you know, as in past presentations and where we've run these guys through the mill on this, I think we've chosen the right path. You know, in my opinion, that this more contemporary standout with these connecting elements that reference the historic building, it's the right thing to do. I am very comfortable with this on all accounts.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Murray?
I remain unhappy about the design, and I thought that I asked for some pictures to illustrate how the buildings will connect to the existing buildings the last meeting, and I don't seem to see any. But in any event, I just do not see how, I have no problems with the glass and the metal, but I do have trouble with how the white brick and the faux wood relate to the historic overlay district. And I'm particularly disturbed by faux wood because it's a false material. Why not, you know, use red brick to match to tie it into the original construction instead of using something that's fake. But basically, I agree with some of what Mark Holmes said, and my stance is unchanged.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Orr?
I don't have anything to add. Everyone has given really good comments.
All right, Mr. Zellman?
The only comment I would add, and I think it comes up in Mr. Perry's letter, is that, you know, when we've looked at other aspects of this project, we have incorporated some more contemporary design into that. And as Mr. Kalinsky said, I think we put these guys through the ringer, and I'm comfortable with what's being presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I feel like I'm somewhere between Ms. Wan and Ms. Murray on this for my comments on it. Obviously, looking at our regulations and facilitating reviews regarding construction, particularly the items regarding new additions and new construction. We advise that applicants that new construction should obviously not destroy materials or characteristics, but they should also be differentiated from the old, but should be compatible with massing, size, scale, and architectural features. I definitely think the massing, size, scale, that we've definitely matched that. But then on the other half of this, of our guidance, we also have that it should be compatible and complementary to the existing character of the historic district. And it is a constant, I would say, quandary in historic preservation to bridge the gap between what is too complementary to the point that it becomes a false historicism, and we create something that looks like was always there, to creating something that looks so different that it stands out in such a way that it distracts from the historic properties in question. And that was really the quandary that I looked at this application with, and particularly with these two buildings with. And I do think that one item that I come back to most, I don't really have an issue with the materials themselves and their composition, but it seems to be the color of the brick. And my worry is that the color of the brick that we proposed here might be too different. And I know you've provided samples here in the package, and normally we'd all be together, and this could be something that you could easily show in front of us. But that is one thing that I guess, Mr. Perry, I'm sitting with going, is there the ability for that color to be changed some to perhaps accommodate the differences between those buildings? Because I know we had different complementary materials in the townhomes, but I don't think we ever had anything as bold as this Glengarry Aspen White. I guess that was a question too. Is that something that could be changed, and is that something that could be accommodated? Are there other colors that were considered? I know we at one point were just basically matching, but I guess I'm trying to understand that.
I would have to defer to the lead representatives to try to answer that question.
Hi, Jim. Thanks, everyone. Nick from Lidl here. Red brick is not something we do in our decor, but I think some off-whites, some grays, we would be okay with, but red brick we don't do in any of our stores.
And I don't think I'm necessarily looking for red brick in my mind. I'm looking for potentially a tone that kind of, I feel like the red and the white are almost too stark. And this is just me as one of the members of the board. I just feel like maybe there is a tone that we could find in between there. The other question I do have for Mr. Perry, I guess then, is I'm assuming that obviously, while I know you have a lot of confidence in working with the tax office there, that after we've gone through this, we may very well be on the design that they're comfortable with. Knowing if they aren't, full well that we're gonna have to come back to us too, which I know creates more work for y'all. So I'm hoping that we don't get into that situation, because obviously I wouldn't want to waste everyone's efforts here. I'm just expressing when I'm looking at this is, through fresh eyes, did we go too dramatic? And I think what I'm merely suggesting at this moment is why I'm okay with the current design. I think I would almost like to condition it that the fact that the board would actually be sympathetic to a darker color here. But obviously that's just me. I might be a lone opinion in this, so I don't know if I'm in the minority.
Hi, Chris, this is Laura Arsenault. Jim or Aaron, can you go back to one of the renderings that we have just to show the building comparison layout? Yeah, thank you. Not that I don't like your words. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's where I'm looking at it when I see this, and I realize, again, renderings can only say so much. We're all doing this digitally now. We're all just seeing renderings and ink on different monitors, and so that's my only question. Obviously, as the acting chair for the moment, I'm not going to be able to put a motion up on the floor to begin with. That's not usually the way it's supposed to go. But that's my one caveat that I would consider adding to this, is in light of the fact that there could be the possibility of VDHR coming back I think that's one of the main things I would want us to be most flexible on, is that the color of that brick is something that I could see changing and still being contemporary and not really having to be the bold decision. As an aside, I have no problem with the other two items, as is just like everyone else.
Mr. Daniels,
Yes, Mr. Klinsky.
do you think we can entertain a motion where we approve the two buildings, but with a restudy of the brick color? They would come back to the board in the future.
I guess that would be a question for Elm Street. I think the question is if it would be contingent on what happens with VDHR. Is that what you're implying? Or are we? I'm trying to understand. Are we gonna move forward approving this as is, or are we gonna condition it that we might be reflective of the fact that there's going to be another review it has to go through?
Well, I was going to condition it on another review of just the brick. Or just a brick color.
I think if I could jump in, I think that would be appropriate. And I think forwarding that kind of motion with that relook at the brick color, we could certainly forward that to VDHR so that they know the thinking of the ARB and what direction you want this to go. That would certainly be helpful.
Okay, I think I would be comfortable with that. And Jim, I think I would like to ask on behalf of Ms. Murray, who brought it up, if when you all come back to us, that you could perhaps bring some photo information to show us that compared to the existing structure in a way that we could see it in some way, whatever it is, however it's rendered to us, just so we could see the two. And I know some of these renderings show it, but I think it's the main building we're most focused on. Is okay. This. Obviously, unless there are any other comments from any other board members, I'll entertain a motion, several motions actually, technically. I think we could actually, as a suggestion, pair together the motions for items, and let me just advise this suggestion that we could entertain a combined motion for items 5 and 6 because they relate to the retail and the grocery, but I think we probably want to do separate ones for number 4 and number 7, or number 6, or the signage plan, excuse me.
Okay. And Mr. Dan, if you allow me, I'd like to make a motion, and pardon me while I go through and kind of pull this together to craft it. All right, so make a motion to approve item number 4, ARB 20 LOR-05, proposal for architecture for grocery store anchor site with Lytle, and combine that with motion, item number 5, ARB 20-LOR-06, proposal for architecture for retail building on western side of Penitentiary, that we approve as submitted with the contingency that they restudy the brick color and bring that back to the board for further approval.
Just tack on that upon review line.
Okay. Upon review of materials, the proposal is found to meet requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zellman. Any discussions?
I do have a, well, since we are looking into the brick color, the elf's color is white. So should we look at both material color as well?
I think it would be, I mean, we certainly understand that if we're going to change one of the primary colors, that could have a ripple effect on some other colors as well.
Okay, good.
So I'm hearing that looking at the brick color and its effects on any of the other material colors.
Yes.
Is that an acceptable change to your motion, Mr. Kalinsky?
Yes, yes, it is.
All right, accepted by your seconder, Mr. Zellman.
Yes.
All right, Mike's hot, so we can do a vote on this one, folks. All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, I would entertain another motion. We have two other items on the table.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zellman.
I'll make a motion that the ARB approve ARB 20-LOR-04 located in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area, tax map numbers 107-1 :09 for the proposed Phase 2C site plan improvements for parking as submitted and presented at the August 13, 2020 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposals found to meet requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Ms. Albury. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. I would entertain another motion for one more item for the signage.
Mr. Daniel, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Thank you, sir.
So item number 6, Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve ARB 16-LOR-07 amendment located in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area, tax map areas 107-1 :09 for the purpose to amend the previously approved comprehensive sign plan for the Liberty development as submitted and presented at the August 13, 2020 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet the requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
I'll second that again.
I believe that was seconded by Mr. Zellman first. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, it carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Perry, thank you very much, and we look forward to talking colors with you again.
Great. Thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for your approvals. We'll be back in touch.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Laura, I believe we have hit the end of the items that our chairman cannot review, and so I believe this would take us to the workhouse or the workshop, unless Mr. Burns cannot also do the workhouse area.
I think I'll have to ask him. I think he can do the workhouse area, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll have to ask him. John, are you back?
I am back. Yes, ma'am. I heard as I was trying to get back on, you said something about whether or not I can participate in the roof repairs at Building H40. Is that the question?
That is good.
Yeah. If they're using preservation tax incentives from the federal program, then I would need to recuse myself. If not, I do not need to recuse myself. But I guess that's a question of the applicant.
Yes, hold on. Let me promote them and let me ask. They can hopefully answer that. It'll be Natalie Knight and Mike Lambert from Capital Facilities. Facilities Management.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Natalie. We can hear you.
Hi. Yes, good evening to the board, and this is Natalie Knight with the Facilities Management Department in Fairfax. And I will need to check on the question that was asked about the funding for the roof. Just need a moment.
Hi, this is Mike Lambert, Assistant Director of Facilities Management. I don't believe the source of funding will come from the tax credits. It'll come from the FMD budget.
Okay. That be the case, I'm good to go.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the gavel is yours again. I relinquish control.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Okay. The next item is item 7. It's a workshop. And this is ARB-20-LOR-08, a proposal for modification to building H40 near the Workhouse area located in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area. Tax map number is 106-4, double print 01, lot 058. The applicant proposes to replace the entire roof following recent storm damage and other associated modifications. I will turn this over to our applicants, Ms. Knight.
Yes, hello. So that's correct. This is for item ARB-20-LOR-08 for the H40 building that's in the Workhouse Arts Center. I have a presentation here.
Yeah, you can share your screen or you can ask, I think, Nicole to put it for you.
Laura, are you able to make Natalie the presenter?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. There we go. All right, try now, Natalie. You should have a new little button at the bottom of your screen now. It's like a little rectangle with an arrow pointing up.
Yes.
Hit that. It says share content.
Okay. I think as everyone, I can see.
Yep. Starting up. Hold on. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, yes. So yes, this is the ARB item. This is a contributing structure in the DC Workhouse Reformatory National Register Historic District. And in this is where the building is located off of Ox Road over here, close to the entrance to the Workhouse Center area. You can see the building pretty clearly from Ox Road. This is the storm damage that was done to the building. The building is mostly made of red bricks. It was a residence at the Reformatory area, and the building roof, it's all a metal seam. They think that it's probably made of tin because of how malleable it is. And in the application items, we have proposals to replace the roof, the entire roof from the storm damage, and with either aluminum or steel. And we would be leaning towards the steel because of the durability. And I would be very curious and interested to hear the comments that the board has about that.
Okay. There were 3. Was there another? No, that's all 3 slides. Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you. This is a workshop, so we don't ask for comments from the general public, but I will instead go through, as Mr. Daniel probably did for the Workhouse projects, and ask for comments or questions from each person in turn. Ms. Aubrey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having had a roofer to my own home yesterday to repair work on my own roof, I am surprised that you haven't actually already done something then as an emergency and that you're coming before us, which is appreciated. And I wish you well in getting the work done as soon as possible, given the summer storm season we are in. I have no questions about the actual nature of what you'll be, the products or anything you'll be putting on the roof.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that with the rest of the package that you submitted to us, you actually provided a lot more additional information. Obviously, a submittal package, the seam roof. I agree with Ms. Aubrey. I would like to see the work done as soon as possible. My concern would be that obviously any historic materials we try to match in kind. If we can't keep them, it looks like some portions are going to have to be replaced because they look like they've completely wrapped themselves around due to the rain. And so, and from my perspective, a lot of this seems pretty straightforward, in particular with just making sure we're keeping consistent with the standards of in-kind replacement as appropriate and moving forward as quickly as possible on it. I don't have many concerns, just other than the fact that the contractor should be qualified and have experience in dealing with historic roofs.
Okay,
I don't want to see asphalt shingles in that spot or a false material that doesn't, isn't consistent with the existing material. So those would be my only comments.
Okay. Ms. Knight, do you have a response?
Oh, yes, just wanted to say that they would be replacing the roof with metal that would be as close of a match in the, type and color as they can get. It would not be shingles. It's going to be metal seam.
Then that from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy in the direction we're going.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Huang?
I don't have a comment. I think the package is well put together. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Kalinsky?
Okay, yeah, and this is a question from Ms. Knight. Excuse me, you'd mentioned aluminum roofing or aluminum versus the supposed tin that was on top there. Is aluminum the choice that you're proposing, or are you looking to go with a galvanized steel, or
Yes.
Is there a specific type of roofing that's been chosen?
The options were either a galvanized steel or aluminum, and we are actually leaning more towards the steel.
Okay.
As opposed to the aluminum, yes.
Okay, I would suggest the steel because I think it's going to be a much closer match. One of the great things about old roofs is the patina that they have, and the the wear over the years, and how it's very slowly takes on that patina when you have a metal roof. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to recreate that, at least not in the short term. But this being high up in the air, it's I would say a little bit less of a concern for me. But I do think the galvanized steel is going to replicate that better. So I would highly recommend that's what you propose to use.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Ms. Murray?
I'm fine with the plans.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Orr?
Charge ahead, get it closed in.
Has Mr. Plumpy showed up at the meeting?
I'm not seeing him.
Not seeing him. Okay, Mr. Zellman?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, then I will add some questions of my own then. Number of questions. One is, it appears as though the seams are flat seams. That is, they're folded over on the historic roof. And the HIT submittal seems to indicate that they're going to have standing seams, which will have a different profile. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Okay. The photographs, if you can go to your photographs from your PowerPoint. If you look at that, the seams appear to be very flat against the roof surface. But the HIT presentation shows that there will be standing seams. In other words, they'll have a very different profile than the current seams. This list, you said that you're going to do smooth panel standard seams. And you put a little red box around them in the HIT presentation. Right. So is there any reason why they can't make those folded seams?
I will check on that. It's correct that that was what's in the proposal now, but I will have that question answered when.
Okay. And then a second thing with regard to seamed roofs like this, how far apart are the current seams, and how far apart will the proposed seams be? Will they match is the basic question. And again, I note that the HIT product brochure says that they can be anywhere from 12 to 20 inches on center. And I'm just wondering, you know, is it possible to match what you've currently got on the roof?
That's another thing that I will check on and get a response to that question.
Okay, and then the third question, again, this is just based on my experience with replacing this metal roofs, is the cap at the gable ridges. Oftentimes in a historic roof, those are very flat, close to the surface, as they appear to be here. You don't have any close-up photos. Perhaps that one on the left, if you really zoomed in on it, you could see. But when modern roofers put roofs on, they tend to put very prominent caps at corners, like you see where two roof planes intersect. And I'm wondering, what is the detail there? Because I don't recall seeing that detail in the HIT presentation.
That's another detail. I'm going to get back to you about that one.
Okay. Those, you know, the seams on metal roofs historically are different from the seams that are traditionally installed today in contemporary practice. And so I just want to make sure that if you're going back on a historic structure in a historic setting, that you're putting it back as closely and as faithfully to the original configuration as possible. So if you can check on those three items, that is the width from seam to seam of the metal roofing, the seam detail and whether or not it can be folded down flat, and how the ridge caps will be configured, that would be very helpful.
Mr. Burns, this is Laura. We have
Yes,
Ms.
Laura.
Stephanie Gaines who might be able to answer those questions. Let's see if I can
Okay, great.
unmute her. Ms. Gaines, you are unmuted and go ahead if you can chat with us.
Hello.
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening. So my name is Stephanie Gaines. I'm the project manager for facilities management that's going to be handling this project. So I've been working directly with the general contractor, HIT. I did speak with them about the seams, and they did propose double wrapped standing seams. I will ask them if they can do flat. I'm sure that that was a detail that came from Peterson manufacturer. When it comes to the spacing of the seams, it will match existing. It's either 12 or 14. I can't remember offhand, but it will match existing.
Okay. Excellent answers. And what about the ridge profile?
I do not know that answer at this time.
Yeah, that's important, because oftentimes you end up and they'll a new roof with a tall ridge cap will resemble more contemporary roof design than it will historic. So I'm concerned about that as well. If you could confer with your contractor as to what type of ridge cap they can put on, and that would be very helpful.
Sure, I can get a detail showing the profile and, take a picture of the existing to demonstrate it will match. Yes.
Right, right. And obviously, you'd have to take that picture where the roof is not partially torn off.
Yes.
Okay, those are the three issues that I had. That's always those types of issues pop up with metal roofs. So thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman,
Mr. Daniel?
I would just remind the applicant that when they do come back for an approval, we will want to have a package that properly represents this in a way that we can approve it as a set of plans that shows the repairs, and the package that all the material and information that's been asked about is all there. Because I know they'll be coming back to seek approval for us. I'm assuming at the next meeting.
Yes. Okay, and then
I'm sure Laura and Nicole will be able to help you with that.
Yeah. I also noticed in the description, it says replace the entire roof and other associated modifications. What does that mean?
It is possible that the existing gutters, when they are taken off to do the repairs, if they need to be replaced, we would do that, but it would be as close to matching and similar as possible.
Yeah, from squinting at these photos on my screen, it appears as though those gutters are not historic, or rather, it almost looks like they're contemporary cave profile gutters, which would be of no historic interest. I don't know what historically was the gutter design on these buildings. Was it half round or some other configuration? Is that something that you know or is known for the Lorton complex?
No, that's something that I know.
I do believe in speaking with the general contractor that it is typically half round on historic buildings. They did confirm that these are in fact commercial, newer grade, 5-inch K. So that's what we intended to put back if needed.
Okay. Generally, we would encourage people, if you have the opportunity and you're replacing all of the gutters, if you know what their profile was historically, if you could replicate that, that would be presenting a more accurate representation of the historic conditions of the building.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, and I assume also then you guys are going to be looking at flashing and other little details like that as well.
Yeah, yes, flashing. We do anticipate some soffit work that may need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we would match existing color. Trying to think of anything else. That's about it.
And is the roof to be replaced also in the photograph, the third photograph on the left? There is an enclosed porch. The roof will be replaced in that as well?
Yes.
And that is the same material?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool.
So I think the only thing of note is we've narrowed it. I know that this is all virtual, so it's a little different, but we have two color samples, as there were actually two different colors on the roof. So we're going to make it all uniform in color, whichever one is chosen.
Okay. Okay. Well, you might look to the other buildings in the complex. If the colors are different, chances are that means one section of this roof may have been replaced at some point. You've got the samples, I think, that you presented to us, and I'm trying to, there they come. You've got one that's called Colonial Red and one that's called Terracotta, right?
Yeah, in conferring with the contractor, we both lean towards Colonial Red, just because the beading that the sun will do on the material within a couple of years, we think it's going to match exactly what that current color is.
Right, that's always a problem when you're replaced with new materials. Do you match the faded color that everybody is familiar with, or do you go back to what it might have been historically? So that's fine. And I assume that the colonial red is the one on the left in your photographs?
Yes, it's the darker color.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Those are the only questions I had. Is this the information that you sought from us tonight? Have we answered all of the questions you have?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, I'm sorry that this happened, and I'm glad to see that the county will move with some dispatch to get this repaired. I note that some of the supplemental photos you sent us included photographs that showed the ubiquitous Katrina blue tarp to keep the water out on a temporary basis. I'm grateful for that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the workshop items we have, and it's time we can move on to board and staff items. The first one of those is review and action on approval of the July 2020 minutes and authorization of payment to the recording secretary. Are there any comments on the minutes that Laura shared with us?
Since they record us, no, sir.
They have been a lot. They have been more specific and more accurate, I find.
Okay, excellent.
Chairman, I'm willing to make a motion if you would like one.
Yes, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve the July meeting minutes and pay the recording secretary accordingly.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Klinsky seconded it. In favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Laura, do you have a treasurer's report?
Sorry, every time I click, I have to click like 30 buttons to get everything back up. Yes, so the treasurer's report for the August 1st balance was $23,903.78.
Cool. Okay, and was there a payment to the recording secretary last month?
There wasn't one last month because we paid him twice for the March minutes.
Ah, okay. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, thank you.
Then we've got a whole series of discussion and update reports.
Yes.
And we might as well go through these in order. First one is the Confederate Names Identification Project. Maybe Ms. Murray can help us a little bit with this, but Laura, would you take the lead?
Yes, hold on. Is Denise, oh yeah, okay. We have Denise Dressel here too as well to talk to us about it. She's spearheading the effort from staff's point of view.
Oh, excellent.
But I'm happy to yield the floor to Ms. Murray if she has a report. That's fine.
Actually, my involvement in this to date has been really peripheral, so Denise knows far more than I.
Okay. Thank you, Elise. I know that the chair, Chairman Burns has received a letter from the History Commission asking for your participation and your help in their efforts. On June 23rd, the board asked, I'll just read this. In response to the board matter presented to the supervisors by Supervisor Palchik and Alcorn, the board passed a motion requesting that the History Commission research and complete a full inventory of Confederate street names, monuments, and public places in Fairfax County and on Fairfax County owned property. And in that motion, there was a charge to the commission to recommend guidelines with the input of other relevant county boards and commissions, such as the Architectural Review Board, for the renaming, replacement, renaming and replacement process of Confederate monuments, street names, rec centers, and parks, and additional public places. And the chairman of the History Commission wrote to the chair of the Architectural Review Board to ask for your cooperation in this effort, specifically for support for those recommendations. I do have an update as to what the History Commission has done so far on the project. If you would like me to give you an update.
Yes, please. I think it would be useful to share it with everyone.
Sure. So the first thing the History Commission did is they formed a subcommittee, which they're calling the Confederate Names Committee, or the CNC, as a steering committee for the report. The research work is being conducted through a committee of the whole, though. A web page was set up for the CNC, which will be updated regularly as the committee moves forward in this work. So if you are wondering where they are in the process, it's on the History Commission's general webpage, and there's a link to the CNC work. Staff has begun to gather information on identifying responsible agencies, as well as the processes for renaming streets and places, if the board so chooses, which includes so far the Commonwealth Transportation Board for the names of roads and the Park Authority Board. I'm still working through the ranking of the roads, though. It's kind of complicated, so I don't think everything goes to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but I'm figuring that out. The Park Authority has already completed their own inventory of Park Authority properties that are affiliated with the Civil War, which included the Robert E. Lee Rec Center, which they changed the name of in 2019. And they've also provided that research to the CNC. The CNC provided staff with a list of approximately 645 Confederate names, after eliminating duplications, to use as the basis for a filtered sort. Staff has been working with an intern in Supervisor Alcorn's office to conduct the filtered sort of county place names by Confederate names identified by the CNC. A list of 17,227 county street names, sorted by magisterial district, was generated and then filtered by the list of 645 Confederate names. And so it goes. And then there was a list of 436 county-owned or leased buildings were sorted and filtered. The list has also been generated and filtered for 7,883 subdivisions, 253 shopping centers, 164 golf courses and non-FCPA parks and trails, and 559 general place names or landmarks. A draft priority list of approximately 55 well-known or locally significant Confederate names has been created. Also for consideration are 10 Confederate or Confederately associated terms, such as Confederate and Rebel, to be used as a guide to prioritizing the research. The prioritized places with the Confederate names will have a more thorough research completed through the use of a standardized template for information gathering. And finally, the History Commission reached out to the ARB to request the board's input on recommending guidelines for the renaming replacement process of Confederate monuments, street names, and rec centers and additional public places. The chair of the ARB responded, giving several good suggestions. The History Commission has requested that the ARB write a letter formalizing their suggestions to include in the report that the History Commission will be giving to the board. And that's my report. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's the first time I've heard this issue distilled into very precise mathematical, logical data sorting. And normally this is discussed as an extremely emotional issue. So that's a good start. to keep the emotions out at the beginning. There are potentially a huge number of things that you will find on both of those lists. And so that's a good idea to try and establish some sort of a hierarchy so you can come up with a reasonable approach to that. You can't rename everything, nor would anybody maybe want to rename everything. I think the one example I cited in my email in response to the History Commission was a subdivision off of, I think, Route 50. It's called Mosby Woods or Mosby Acres or something like that, in which every street name in the subdivision has some associated with Civil War. Some are kind of neutral, like Ranger, but others have, indirect things. Like one street is called Traveler, which was Robert E. Lee's horse's name.
Travelers on our list.
The Traveler's on the list. Okay, so the poor horse. The horse had nothing to do with this. But nevertheless, he's kind of lumped in with the things to be studied for potential renaming. But there's an entire subdivision is rift with these names. Ms.
John,
Murray?
it's no longer in the county. It became part of the city like 20 years ago. It's Fairfax City's problem.
Oh, okay.
Hey, John?
Yes, sir. Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that the History Commission has seen the ACHP's statement on controversial commemorative works. While I know we're not always dealing with historic properties here, the ACHP released guidance about that, and I think it has some really fundamental principles that could really be helpful for forming this guidance that the county is looking at, particularly because it looks at things about stewardship, changing values, and analyzing things from that. Looking at it from a historic context, so obviously there's a lot of context associated with Mosby, and then obviously the concept of inclusion, in making sure that parties are involved in a process to consider these things, because that's really, as you pointed out, Denise gave it to us in a very mathematical format, but the diversity of things that have these names and commemorative recognitions is going to be, it's a wild range of stuff. And so I think those principles need to recognize, what are things that were just given a name out of haphazard, I suppose? What are things that were given a name deliberately for a specific reason? And then what was that reason? And, what are we trying to preserve here if we're trying, and not even from the historic property perspective, but what are we trying to be stewards of in those instances? So from my time at the ACHP, it was a controversial issue. Obviously, from our perspective, when I work in that job, if it's not a historic property, then the regulations that I work with don't apply. And so we kick it out of our responsibility. But in these instances, we're not talking about things that are necessarily historic, but the concepts of, stewardship, inclusion, and thinking about, what are we representing here, I think are good concepts that could still be built into a policy like this.
Okay, fine. Now, Denise, you have asked for a formal letter from the ARB. I agree that a single email from me is not sufficient response. Now, I guess, Laura, should we have people on the ARB who want to add suggestions to how this might be accomplished? To give those to you, and then you and I will collate them into a letter that represents the various viewpoints of the ARB. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I shared your email with the rest of the ARB at this point, so maybe we share that with them first and share your initial comments and get some feedback from them.
That would be great.
And then that way we can see, and everybody can think about it a little bit too after hearing what Denise reported out to us.
Right. Okay. So then once you receive a copy of my email, take a look at that, add your own suggestions, comments, and then send that on to Laura, and then Laura and I can collate and come up with a letter to send to the History Commission. Denise, is there a deadline?
I have asked for everybody's research to be turned into me by the first History Commission meeting in October, which I believe is October 5th. So if you could get compiled, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Denise. I appreciate the update and look forward to hearing from everybody on how Fairfax County can respond effectively to this challenge. Okay, the next thing is the Zoning Ordinance Modification Project, ZMOD. I don't know about the rest of you, but my links wouldn't work. Laura sent me a link, and it turned out that the document she was referring to was 711 pages. So I went through and I did a search on the term historic property and then also the term historic properties. And I discovered that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages where either one or both of those terms were included. So, Laura, which of those pages is it that you want us to comment on?
So this came to you, I think when it came to you a while ago with ZMOD, and QC Judge and Carmen Bishop came and they presented on a number of issues. This is what this is regarding. So what we've done now is we've kind of taken another, I think it's sat dormant for 6 months or so, if not longer, and that we are taking a new lens on it and did some more analysis on it. So what we had talked about, staff had talked about, was the use of the term historic when describing a place. So there's 3 kind of categories in a historic district. You have historic property, contributing property, and non-contributing property. So in, some of you may not know this, but our contributing properties are only defined by a random memo from 1991 that says which properties are contributing in a historic district. And they're kind of, they're shown on the historic overlay district map. So between the map and this memo, that's how we have our 2 things defined. So the historic property is kind of like, for an example, would be, I think of a good one. So Centerville has a number of historic properties, and those are kind of the founding kind of properties in which the HOD was outlined and, you know, period of significance defined and things like that. So the question
We don't use the term eligible for or listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's the only definition of historic property I know. It's like written into my blood.
Right. So let me pull up what the memo says. And I think I included it in the SharePoint file, but let me know.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And I guess the other question I had, Laura, is have we ever added another contributing property beyond the ones from that memo? Or have we never done that since?
Well, and so the only historic overlay districts that have been modified is Centerville, which was done in 2006. And that went through a whole gambit. So if you look at the map of Centerville, and I can pull it up if you need it, but they reanalyzed all the properties, and there's a number of properties in Centerville that are termed historic. And then there's contributing and then non-contributing. So, but then, for example, you have Sully, where Sully has one historic property, which is just the Sully mansion. So, you know, it's, we don't, and let me go back, sorry, I'm sidetracked now.
Laura,
yes.
Laura, I think that Deborah Canan's memo was really just an inventory. It wasn't a policy document. It was, this is what we have listed in all our documents. I don't think she was defining the universe.
It seems like we created confusion by making that weird category off that document. Because it seemed to me if it's contributing, it's a historic property. And so contributing properties and historic properties should be one and the same. Just they would be contributing to a larger overall district, but we don't use the same terms that I'm using right now. So that's why I agree with Elise that it seems like we just created an arbitrary category with contributing.
Well, I'd like to add in about this 1991 memo that has the list of the contributing properties. It was created solely based on how old the properties were. And it said, the person who wrote the memo just went through every historic district, every historic overlay district, and identified properties that were 50 years of age or older, and then wrote them down as being contributing. And it has presented problems to the ARB. If you remember the St. Mary's Church, where we had to go and specifically declare that two properties that were previously determined contributing were not, so that they could be torn down by the church. And we have had similar problems with properties that were on this list as labeled as contributing, but with no explanation whatsoever as to the historic nature of the property and whether or not they contributed actually to the significance of the historic overlay district. The only reason they're labeled as contributing is because they were 50 years of age or older. And this was something that has come up again and again. And as you will recall, when we entered into the contract with Patriots, this is one of the things that they're supposed to be looking at and defining for us. So, I mean, the contributing thing is problematic. As far as what's the definition of historic property, I agree with everyone who said with the standard definition that's used by everybody in the world, and the Fairfax County should not be coming up with their own little definition that is somehow different.
Thank you. I think that, let me back up a little bit. The reason this is coming up is partly because of ZMOD, but partly because we're also doing, and this is segueing to one of our topics, but the Historic Overlay District Design Guidelines. And they're trying to get us a template of what we're looking for. And they're also, this HT Tracers is the consultant, but we're also trying to work on Fallen Hills and trying to get their draft design guidelines. So they're trying to figure out what template we're using. And this question came up with ZMOD, but it's also kind of resurfaced with the traceries discussion of, are we going to keep the three categories? Are we going to keep historic? Are we going to keep contributing? And we're going to keep obviously contributing and non-contributing, but do we want to keep historic? So what we wanted, the reason why we're kind of floating this out there now is we wanted to give them some guidance, but we also wanted to have the discussion of the knowledge on the ARB and background of some of this stuff, because like hopefully with the Historical Overlay District design guidelines, we charge them, as Michelle said, we charge them to help us define contributing, non-contributing, etc. But do we want to have that extra category of historic in there? And we wanted to see if there was any knowledge on the board of why it was included. And I will say that despite ZMOD, if historic gets included at that point, when we redo the Historic Overlay District design guidelines, that will inform the zoning ordinance and what goes in to the zoning ordinance parts of the Historic Overlay Districts, if that makes any sense. But anyway, we will be revising it. So at that point, we will be able to change this. If we didn't change it right this second, which it sounds like, I think we need the consultants to do the research for us first and determine if that's something we want further. But we wanted to float it out to the board to get their opinion on it. And I think we've got some answers. If anybody else wants to chime in, feel free.
I feel like you all should read the memo closely because I think people are misinterpreting. It says that, just a second, I have to switch back to my PDF file. It says historic is that the property is named in the Historic District Ordinance.
Let me share my screen. I can pull it up real quick.
And that the property is named in the Historic District Report adopted by the Board of Supervisors when first created. Those are those little booklets I gave all of you and are no longer in print. So that's really just a result of the staff work when they put together the Historic Overlay Districts.
Elise, I think that's a good point. I think the first one, though, is conflicting because historic, merely says that any of these things were named in the ordinance. It doesn't actually give any criteria in a way that actually captures the term in a way. You're right. The memo defines the two terms as they look at them and the criteria that they went by. But I think if we're doing the ZMOD update, I really think historic property should be very close to what the National Historic Preservation Act uses. Obviously, we could modify it in some capacity if we needed to, but I do think the prehistoric, historic, district, site, building, structure, object, I mean, that's the most, as Ms. Aubrey said, that's the most traditional term. And I think it would capture the most things that fall in these. But you're right, these things were established by the Board of Supervisors, so that is conflicting, obviously.
And I think Reverend Canan's language is not totally significant. I don't think the label historic, it's not a term, I don't think it was a term of art. I think it was the author's term.
Well, it's been codified in the zoning ordinance and also in our maps. So it's kind of like at this point, this is kind of our guiding document we're going on. If we want to change it moving forward, I don't think we're going to change it with ZMOD because ZMOD is really like an editorial only kind of edits and changes. So they're much more minor than this. And as you know, when staff was discussing it and Denise and Nicole and I talked about, we need to have the definition of historic be in the zoning ordinance if we want it to be in there. And then also the treatment of it if it's more significant than buildings that are contributing or something like that. So those are kind of the two questions we're floating out here.
It seems that the intent of the other contributing was meant to capture properties within these overlay districts that were not originally captured part of the original ordinance, district ordinance, when they created them. But it seems, like, as Ms. Aubrey pointed out, that intent failed when the list was compiled, because there are some buildings that, while they're over 50 years old, it says and contributes. And some of the buildings we found, while they might have been over 50, did not necessarily contribute to the district. And so I guess it's good to know, Laura, that it's not this that we have to change, but we have to I think we need to be more clear about when we add buildings, the districts, that this is a mess to untangle.
Well, this is why we're asking you.
Yeah, I can add a few comments. One is, this is a list from 1991. And if you look at it, as Elise was careful to point out, it lists its limitations in the opening paragraphs. This is what I did. That's essentially what Mr. Krivitsky. By the way, I know Bruce Krivitsky. He's up in Connecticut, I think now, he laid out the criteria that he used to assemble this list, and he also defined the terminology that he assigned to each one of these. So this is simply a list, and I don't think that we can impose 2020 definitions on the list and come up with easy answers for each individual thing. I looked very quickly down at Woodlawn, and it lists Woodlawn, the house, it lists Pope Leahy House, and then other contributing lists Grandview, which is the later historic property that's on the south side of the plantation house itself. And so all that stuff's there. I think it also did it list. Hang on a second. Let me go back to it listed the Friends Meeting House and the Baptist Church as historic. I didn't realize that we considered the Baptist Church historic. But there it is.
That's right, because we have a different definition. And then, can you guys see the Centerville map I pulled up on the screen?
Yeah.
Regarding the Baptist Church was torn down and replaced.
Yeah.
So I think that the list was made before that happened. So the current Baptist Church is not. Yeah.
So my point is, you have to recognize this is a list from 1991. That was last century. It's clearly out of date, and we have to take it with a grain of salt. And every single thing that's listed on it, we need to probably reevaluate.
Right, and that's the same.
I agree with Mr. Daniel that we need to come to some consensus on what definitions we're going to use, and then go back and look at these things in light of those definitions. That's why I was concerned about this coming up, is putting definitions in ZMOD that we don't quite yet have the confidence to actually put into ZMod.
Well, it came up.
Was my concern.
It came up with ZMod when we started analyzing it, and then when we came back around for the second round of, I don't know, probably on the third or fourth round of edits for the historic overlay district section, it came up again in discussion. And I was like, I know we talked about this, and then Nicole, Denise, and I talked about it, and then we thought, okay, we need to get some clarification. And I will say next month, I'm thinking, I think Tracers is going to come in and give us an status update on the historic overlay district design guidelines. So that's why we wanted to throw it out there, get it to you, and get it open for discussion, because obviously, as you can see on our maps are in there, but there's no real definition, and the way staff treats it and the treatment of it, if we come into review, is it different? So just something to throw out there and to get you start to think about those things.
Right, and if we're confused, I guarantee you that potential applicants who want to make changes to any of these buildings are going to be confused.
Right, I mean, and that's what we had talked about, is when we look at them, as Chris said, you know, is there any difference in treatment from being historic or contributing, not by staff's definition and not by the ARB's definition? So is it needed? Maybe. It just is a matter of just open for discussion, and we need to give the consultant some kind of guidance on what we're looking for, because that's going to inform the design guidelines, the maps, and things like that moving forward. So it sounds like we can. I mean, I kind of just sprung this on you tonight, but if we can think about that for next month and kind of move forward on that, that would be great. I think you have some good points I can give to the consultant too, and then bring it up next month again. Okay, now I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench in all of this. When I did my word search on historic property and all, lo and behold, it zipped back to the agritourism section of ZMod. Mm-hmm. And if you remember the Bull One Winery, they claimed that they weren't bound by building codes, and because it was exempt in the way in which the agritourism regulations had been set up, and yet the use of alternative use of historic properties, agritourism was one of them. And so, are they going to now claim that if they put a winery in there, they don't have to come to the ARB? I don't know. That was, and by the way, whatever happened to the Bull Run Winery, all the concerns that we had about that? I'm putting on the spot, I realize, but maybe next time. No, we, I think from what ended up happening was there's a lot of that's happened since then, John. But, let me think for a second. I think we reached out to Manassas Battlefield Park. We talked to them. We reached out to the RPA folks, asked them if there was anything they could recommend from that point. We reached out to site plan and enforcement, and everybody that we asked from enforcement, we kind of reached a dead end. So the only kind of thing I found was that because they removed the trees, they might have triggered a site plan, but there's nothing to stop them from going out and cutting trees. They don't have to pull a permit to cut trees. So I think I went around in circles and circles, and it just came that there was no way to kind of enforce, bring enforcement on them for what the trees that came down in the historic district. And that's really all we have purview over out there. But I don't think my recollection too is that the district supervisor supported them. So that, in terms of political support from the board, not going to happen. I would guess so. Okay, but thank you for that my little digression here. Okay, so what is our next step then? How do you want comments from us? It's just we as staff, we were kind of stuck, and we were like, how do we move forward? But since the ARB is going to be using this document, we really wanted to get your thoughts on it. And like I said, ZMod brought it up, but it's not going to be an immediate change, because I think ZMod's going to, don't be surprised if you see the term historic in the ZMod final thing.
Because what you're saying, Laura, is they can't change that term technically.
I think it's too much of a, from the discussion that we've had here, it is too much of a change to be a quote unquote editorial change, because we're going to change procedure, how we define it and things like that. And that's a much bigger change in policy and process change than just cleaning it up for language purposes, if that makes sense. That's why we're having this discussion. And that's why I think we're kind of, I think we're going to, go ahead.
I mean, mulling it in my head for a minute longer, it seems that almost everything within an overlay district that's considered contributing is historic. I mean, that's the only way it really gets there, is to be contributing under our definition. So the real problem is we have a secondary definition, if ZMOD's using it, that doesn't really serve a benefit. We have a catch-all definition that is based on that memo is being used in a way to interpret properties that weren't in the original designation for the overlay district. But in my mind, historic should encompass any property that was originally identified in the overlay district, as well as those that have been determined to be contributing later on and have been added in. They would all fall under the larger historic umbrella, no matter what. And but so it almost feels like contributing is, almost doesn't serve a purpose.
Right. And so that was kind of the discussion was, could we just strike historic and say they were contributing, or was historic standing on its own, or, that type of thing. And that's where we kind of got stuck. So I think what I would recommend is that, like I said, since it's such a major change, and since we're having most of the changes we had much smaller discussions about, so the fact that it's risen to this level is obviously a much more bigger change. And since we have the historic overlay district design guidelines coming in, if you looked at the ZMOD document, all the historic overlay districts are now going to be placed next to the historic overlay district administration part. So they'll all be together instead of a separate appendix at the end of the zoning ordinance.
Well,
so the point is we have
I want to raise a point. Laura, aren't all of those historic properties deemed contributing in the ordinance or in the booklets? So basically they have two designations, contributing in the most official one and historic in the second one. So I think we can just leave historic out.
The only thing that I worry about, because I thought that would seem like an elegant solution, but does that hurt archaeological properties? Because it seems to capture, or we even care about archaeological properties in this context. I know I care about them, but do we, in the sense of ZMOD, does it matter? Because you're right. I think Elise is right. If they're all contributing, then they are by their very essence historic properties inside the overlay district. They contribute to the overlay district, thus historic. But I didn't know if that could affect a site itself, though. If we would be discriminating on any archaeology.
The point I was making is that these properties are all described as contributing in other places. All of historic properties are described as, aren't they described as contributing in the booklets and in the ordinance?
And this is the problem. They're not in the zoning ordinance. The only thing that we have them listed as contributing is on our maps and in that memo.
But have you looked at the booklets?
The booklets for the historic overlay districts?
Yeah, that was one of her sources.
The booklets for, you mean the staff report for
the staff reports, the staff
report. So the staff report.
They were bound in booklets.
Yes. Okay. I'm like, what are booklets is she talking about? But yes, the staff report. So yeah, I know they took it from that, and I know that memo from 1991 clarified, because some of them were not defined in some of those booklets as contributing properties. So that memo was supposed to be clarifying it. I can go back and check and confirm and cross-reference all those. I have to go back to the. That's fine. I'll just cross-reference what's listed, where. But I think for the ZMOD discussion, like I said, I think there's too much in it to be able just to strike it without having some further consequences later on down the road. And I think that once we get into the conversations with what's actually contributing, once the maps are updated, once the historic overlay districts are reanalyzed and updated, that we'll have a much better and clearer picture of whether or not we need to include that separate historic designation in our vocabulary for the historic overlay districts.
Okay. All right, that's a lot of discussion.
But thank you. No, this is what we had internally. We had a bunch of discussion, and we couldn't put our finger on it. And there's a lot of misinformation, which is why we're so excited to get this design guidelines project kicked off, because then it'll kind of help us reanalyze all of our districts and give a much needed update. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all of that. At this point, I could use a bathroom break. So depending on the interests of the rest of the members of the ARB, we can either take a 5-minute break or I'll simply pass the gavel to Mr. Daniel. Is there a sense of the board on that matter?
I'm willing to take the gavel from you, John, and let you go run off the camera for a minute.
Okay, I would appreciate that greatly. I shall return shortly.
There you go. Gavel taken. Looking at the agenda, we now are on to the Reston Survey. I'll add as a side comment, the task force that I got appointed to has not met since then and has canceled all its meetings until I think October right now. So I have not done anything with Reston Comprehensive Plan, so no updates on my end. So I guess, Laura, Reston Survey?
Hold on one second too, and I forgot, I should have asked this, is Denise and Nicole, did you have anything to add to the previous discussion on the historic or contributing, non-contributing? Because we've talked about it like at length for a long time.
No, I just think, go ahead, Nicole.
I was say no, not really anything on my end. I think what our discussion was is that we wanted to hear from the ARB and what they wanted to do.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Your conversation sort of mirrored ours. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Sorry. The next thing was the Reston Survey, and Denise is working hard on that one too. So she's kind of a point person for that. So I was going to ask her to give us an updated report.
Sure. There isn't much to report. There was a brief hiatus when the pandemic struck and travel bans, et cetera, but I know the field work has been completely done, and the contractor was given an extension to have the survey in by this September. So we should be hearing something next month.
Okay.
If I may, Laura, I should have asked you, but I wanted to give a update on Gum Springs since we got the letter, the grant letter. Yeah, so thank you. I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, I was going to say you might want to wait till John comes back.
I'd wait till John comes back, since that's probably something he'll be very interested in.
Sure. He'd probably like to hear that. Yes, sorry, Denise, I should have, yeah, whatever. We've got so many.
So we will probably hear something in September, potentially.
For Reston, yes.
Yes, okay. Hopefully we're thinking adaptively about how we can do our public coordination on that now.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And hopefully we'll have some sort of public meeting, something in this type of forum.
All right. Oh, and there he is. So there you go, Denise. You can now talk about Gum Springs. Then Mr. Burns, the gavel is yours.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Gum Springs, I just heard.
I forget to turn on my camera. Yes, so Gum Springs, I wanted to update you on the grant request that we had put in for Gum Springs. We had actually applied for 2 separate grants. One CLG grant to complete a National Register nomination for the Pride of Fairfax, which was the Oddfellows Hall in the Gum Springs community. And then we had applied for a cost share grant to have a survey completed for the Gum Springs district. And the state came back and said, we'll give you a little bit more money on the CLG, but we're not going to give you anything on the cost share. So rewrite your scope, collapse them into one scope, and it's going to be one CLG grant. So that's what we got. We got $10,800 in federal matching funds, and the county is putting $16,700 toward a National Register nomination for the Pride of Fairfax and an architectural survey, selected survey with a preliminary information form completed for the Gum Springs Historic District.
Wonderful.
And we just got the letter Monday.
Excellent. That's really good news.
And to follow up on,
that's literally just a mile from where I am sitting, and not a mile from where Mr. Kalinsky is sitting, but it's a mile from where he lives. Excellent.
and I will follow up on that too. We just got a updated BRT, Route 1 BRT letter today, and they're treating, Nicole's going to smack my hand because I never get the terminology right, but they're treating Gum Springs as potentially, or not potentially, they're treating it as issually eligible without making a determination of eligibility. Is that right? But okay. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So that they're treating it as eligible, and that so this will be kind of concurrent with that as we'll be doing this survey. So Gum Springs has got a lot of goodwill in the past couple months.
Good. I'm very happy to hear that. Okay, so did that follow on Reston Survey? Are we on to Bois d'Or?
Yes. Is that how you say it? Bois d'Or?
Well, that was my fractured high school 2 years of French.
Your guess is as good as mine. I can never.
I was gonna say it's got an accent aigu at the end, so it should be Dore.
Dore.
Bois d'Or. Okay.
Bois d'Or.
Thank you. Someone who's more literate than me. Okay.
In French. So we got this National Register nomination, and as a CLG, we have the courtesy to review it. So History Commission is reviewing it and getting me comments back by the end of the month. And I don't know if everyone had a chance to look on it. I know Ms. Aubrey said she didn't have any comments on it, but if you have any comments, please send it to me by the end of the month. It's going to the VDHR board next month. I think it's the 18th of September. So I'm trying to have a memo to them with any comments that we have by then. Yeah, but it's a great property up in the Great Falls area, right on the Potomac River. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, the only complaint I had about the nomination was there are no floor plans. You know, you have this building and you're looking at it and trying to figure out, well, what's what, and there's no floor plans to help you figure it all out. I don't recall that there was a photo key that told you this photo's from this angle, this photo's from that angle. All they did have was that one very distant aerial photograph. You can see the long little driveway go up and then the circular drive around the property. But that's an enormous piece of land. That's quite something. Is this, I shared it with a historian who knows more about Thomas Palston Waterman than I do. And his question was, is this property under some sort of threat? Is this some preparation for an easement? I mean, do we know anything about the context? Why suddenly a large piece of land on the Potomac might be destroyed?
So I do actually. I was working with the owner's daughter, helping her collect information, and they are preparing to put an easement, a preservation easement on it.
Wow. That's a big piece of land if you look at that aerial photograph.
They have conservation easements on the property. I think they have conservation easements with the National Park Service. And they also have, it's in an agricultural and forestal district. And they're looking to put a preservation easement on the house, the structure.
That's quite something. Okay. Well, thank you. So if the board, VDHR board is meeting on September 18th, Laura, when do you need the comments by? September 1st?
I'm hoping by the end of the month. I think History Commission is getting them to me either, oh gosh, where's my calendar? I think the 28th. So if you could get them to me around that time too, that'd be fine. I'm just going to compile them and put the, track changes in the document and be able to send off my comments.
So that's 2 weeks from now, basically.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So noted. Homes Run Acres?
Yeah. So we just got our names for the work group. So we are going to start that hopefully in the beginning of September. I've got Samantha, Kay, and Elise all volunteering to be on the group, which is great. And then it'll be made up of 6 community members, and then they're going to have 3 alternates, which they'll follow along with the process. And that way, if somebody isn't able to make it or needs to drop out of the group, we've got people that are involved with it. So we're going to start kind of a similar process. Start talking about what for them, what's important for the neighborhood, what would be significant features that they'd want to preserve, and then kind of go through all the structures. Like I told you, Kira and I finished up the field work a long time ago, and now her and I are just going through and looking at structures individually and evaluating them to see what we think are contributing and non-contributing, and then we'll present that to the work group as we go. I'm anticipating, we did 6 initial meetings at Holland Hill. There's about 100 less structures in Homes Run Acres. So I'm hoping for maybe 5 at the most. Hopefully shorten up the process a little bit. And I feel like just on our initial survey that there's less modifications than there are in Holland Hills. I think similarly there's they have strange shaped lots, so there's only so many places they can go. And so a lot of them have been modified in very similar ways, which is kind of helpful too. And there's only 4 different house types, which also makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, so that will be the next section. And we're also going to try to work on getting a contractor on board to do design guidelines, hopefully as we go through this process so that they'll be ready currently as we get through the work group stuff.
Okay, that's good. I heard Elise and Kay, and who was the third person from the ARB?
Samantha.
Samantha, okay.
And technically Elise is representing the History Commission, but since she's here tonight, I thought I'd point it out.
Okay. All right, thank you, Elise, Kay, and Samantha for volunteering to be on that. If I don't tell you, Nicole, at some point remind me, Dan Kiley did a landscape plan for one of those houses. Only one. He did 100 in Holland Hills, but he did 1 in Homes Run Acres. I have the address, but you might have to prod me.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely do that. I'd love to see that because they're definitely a bit more manicured than Holland Hills. There's some parts of the neighborhood that are more resemble Holland Hills, kind of built in a lot more trees, but then there's some that very much have straight up lawns and kind of much more structured landscapes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Next one's Holland Hills.
So Holland Hills, we tried to get a meeting in August and it didn't happen because of timings and vacations and things like that. So our next goal is to have a meeting in September sometime. I'm trying to figure out, coordinate a date with everybody in the group, in the work group, and also the design guidelines consultants, and hoping to do it sometime in late September. I don't have a date confirmed yet. But we hopefully will start that back up and basically press play instead of pause, which is what we did in March when all this happened. So they'll be getting the contributing, non-contributing maps. They'll be getting the justifications for our recommendations for contributing and non-contributing structures and buildings, properties. And then what's the third thing? They're going to get kind of our draft design guidelines and move forward on that. So we're chugging right along behind the scenes. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. I had raised a question and asked Laura to put this on the agenda tonight. To what degree is the ARB involved, should be involved, in site-specific plan amendments? And these come up periodically. There's a series of them are proposed in South County at the moment, one of which caught my eye, which is a proposed redevelopment of the Bellevue Shopping Center in the northeast corner of the south end of Fairfax County, just outside the Beltway, just west of the Potomac. So, what's up?
So I reached out to my colleague Graham Owen, and he's kind of the SSPA manager. He's taken on kind of the point person for all of the SSPA projects. So this is South County. SFPA. So they do North County every 2 years. So they do the North County 2 years, and then the next thing is the South County, and then it's North County again. So now we're on the South County track. But right now what they're doing is we got the nominations for the SSPA site-specific plan amendment. So these are nominations that can come in from anybody, and they kind of ask if these uses are appropriate and ask for a change to the comp plan and its site-specific location. So right now we're creating PD, which is like 2/3 of the planning department, is creating task forces for each of these properties and in the districts. And then, so there'll be a Lee District 1, there'll be a Springfield District 1, there'll be a Mount Vernon District 1. And with these task forces, they're talking about which nominations they think should be added to the work program. So then this work program has further study, and what happens is at some point in January, these nominations are going to go in front of the, hold on, I'm reading an email. They're going to go in front of the, I think it's Planning Commission, and then the board to put these, to authorize these to start the site-specific plan amendments. And that's not happening until January. So when I talked with Mr. Owen, he recommended there's a website, and I can send it to the ARB. It's a track a nomination page. So I know, John, you're very specific at the Bellevue Shopping Center one. There's one you can track that nomination specifically with the meetings. Let's see what else. He said he'd be happy to come to the ARB possibly in January or after the board adopts the which one. So right now they're basically in a feasibility stage, and to see if there's more work and appropriate for those areas for each site-specific plan amendment, and then the board will adopt which ones would go on the work program. And that's when that kind of starts at staff's through this preliminary evaluation. The board adopts it, and then it goes back into more analysis and more details.
So when you say board, is that the Planning Commission board, or is that the?
No, I'm sorry. This is the Board of Supervisors.
So you said it goes to the Planning Commission in January. Then when does it go to the Board of Supervisors?
No, it goes to the board. So the board is, and I'm sorry, I'm learning this process as we go along. The Board of Supervisors adopts the work program in January. I don't know if it goes to Planning Commission. I can check, but it definitely goes to the board as a work program. So they adopt the work program and then basically authorizes staff to start doing research on these site-specific plan amendments. So right now they're in a feasibility stage with the community and the task force to see if they're even viable to move forward and things like that.
Okay, okay. All right, so then I guess a follow-up, I don't know if I should ask this question now or later, but in one of the PDFs that you sent us of work that's coming up, there's something called the current work program.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the items under there was essentially describing making changes to the comp plan for county-owned buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, is there anything in there that has anything to do with county-owned buildings that may or may not be historic?
I don't know, but I will look into it.
Right. And then the same thing under the current work program, there was something called the Reston Area Study and Plan Amendment. Same question.
Well, that's, I think, part of the task force that Chris would be on.
Okay.
That hasn't met yet, but they eventually will be working on the plan amendment, and then the Reston Survey will be incorporated into whatever that starts.
John, they haven't met since I've been invited to join. They canceled all their recent meetings since I joined, so I don't know what I did.
They knew you were coming and just canceled everything.
But obviously, that is one of the ones that I think we're learning that we have to directly ask for these things.
Yes,
No,
yes. That's why I'm raising the issues.
My understanding is Supervisor Alcon had a surgery and he is recovering.
That is my understanding too. I didn't want to go into too much detail about it, but yeah, I think that was the case.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty valid excuse for postponing a meeting. Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Laura, for that update, and I would be happy to participate in whatever might be appropriate in those kinds of reviews. The next thing was Section 106 cases.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of Section 106 telecom cases that have come in. There's been a lot in all over the county that we review. And one came in on the Heron House and Lake Ann Historic Overlay District. And it's really a minor change. They're adding some new antenna. And in the previous kind of changes they've done in there, we kind of asked them to do, we recommended for mitigation screening and painting to match the existing building, which they were okay with. But this is more of an FYI, if you had any comments, but there's already an existing telecommunications facility on top of Heron House, and this is just adding some new antenna, not increasing height, it's just a different, just adding some more to the kind of already screened enclosure that they have up there.
Yeah, I did look at that, and it seemed fairly innocuous, although it is fairly substantial.
It's already pretty big. It's already pretty big.
Exactly.
So one or two antennas.
These changes are not significant in relation to what's already there.
Right.
Okay, cool.
And what's already there was subject to intense negotiation.
Yes, right. I do remember all that. So, and other Section 106 cases, I noticed in your list, there was a series of buildings on Fort Belvoir that VDHR had a lot of comments on, and they said that they were going to have to revise their proposed memorandum of
these
agreement.
are the warehouses along
the old rail line. Yeah. So that's just still background at this point.
Yeah, I was on that one. I haven't heard anything since VDHR came back and Fort Belvoir said they were going to have to go back and rework everything.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And then 106. Soapstone. It's been quiet. Laura, you told me last time I asked you about it, it's been quiet. Has anything developed since then?
I will tell you the only kind of update for that is that we haven't heard anything, but that the Reston Now article came out that everybody got excited about. I think it was last week or the week before. Must have been last week, because right before History Commission. So we reached out to the staff that we know there, and they're trying to get some additional funding for XYZ, but I'm not sure exactly to what cause. But the History Commission is writing Federal Highway Administration, is it federal? Okay. Federal Highway Administration and asking for an official update. So once we hear back from that, we will pass it along to you, because we really, like you said, it's been very quiet, and we wanted to get some more information. So that's what the History Commission decided to do at their last meeting.
Okay, if they're going ahead with that, I don't think there's any reason to ask a second time. Well, at least if you can make sure the History Commission shares that, I'd be grateful. Okay, then we have other. Is there any other? No.
I have a little other. I'll piggyback on 106.
Okay.
I will soon be relinquishing my role as reviewing Fort Belvoir, because there is an Army liaison at the ACHP who will be handling all Army caseloads. So I will no longer have to recuse myself. I would advise Laura and the ARB members that the Army right now is working forward on a program comment that would allow them to do lots of alterations to historic housing, which would affect Fort Belvoir. That is something that we might want to, as an ARB, look into or possibly consider conveying comments to Fairfax County on. That's about all I can say on the issue, but it is definitely going to change and affect some certain things, it appears, including the existing agreement we were participated in regarding the housing at Belvoir.
Okay, is that a specific period housing? Historic, Cape Part Wary?
Interwar, so everything from after World War I to beginning of World War II.
Okay.
All colonial revival in Fort Belvoir.
Which was most of Fort Belvoir.
Yes.
Yeah. Give me, I'm writing a note. Okay, that's good. Thanks for the heads up on that. We have to keep an eye on that. Any other old business? Hearing none. Okay, new business. none, I will exercise my prerogative here and make a few comments if I could. I attended, and I think Laura and Denise and Samantha attended the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Forum 2020, which was last week. Anybody else attend that?
It was Nicole and Denise. I didn't get to go, but yes.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, so Nicole. Okay. Well, I've learned a number of things there, and I thought I would share some of the things that I wrote down. One was you can judge the level of support for preservation in any jurisdiction by this simple phrase: money doesn't lie. How much of the county budget is spent on historic preservation? There's a question we can ask. Look at the county budget, look at what's spent on Denise and Nicole and Laura's salary and on our robust budget allocation. But anyway, that was an interesting thing. One jurisdiction said that they went to their Board of Supervisors and told them that in the absence of a county survey, which Fairfax County has never done, all demolition permits in the county should be reviewed. And the example I would use here is the One University Plaza building, which has won an architectural design award that the county is proposing to be torn down because it's just 1970 office space. So there's one thing. Good advice here that we're already pretty much cognizant of: find supporters in high places, which means the more that we can engage our respective district supervisors, the better off we'll be. Another measure was what percentage of all the county buildings are protected, and then also what percentage of the county buildings are over 40 years old, 40 being the new threshold because it's going to be 50 by the time we get around to looking at it. Someone asked a question. I don't know if it was somebody from here or somebody else has encountered the same thing, but they said that the political oversight imposed on an architectural review board effectively precludes them from commenting on Section 106 and NEPA reviews because of the short deadlines involved. I don't know if that was one of us. It was not me, I can tell you that. But I thought that was like,
sounds like us.
Yeah, it sounds like us. But anyway, so the idea that I got out of that was, okay, so if we make a proposal to the Board of Supervisors that we want to make comments on a specific thing, if we did that in the form of a motion so that it would be reflected in our minutes, which are publicly accessible, then the State Historic Preservation Office might conceivably access that, whether or not the Board of Supervisors approves it. That sounds like subterfuge, but anyway, that was the idea that I came up with there.
I'm still working with the trying to determine how we respond to Section 106 in our correspondence and communication with the Board of Supervisors. I'm still not getting there.
That's a good point, John. Could Laura and the staff just provide our meeting minutes as part of their comments?
Yeah.
Good. It's public information.
Not necessarily referenced in your letters when you comment on a 106 review, but saying additionally, here are the meeting minutes from the ARB in which the topic was discussed.
Yeah.
What? I don't know how bad I want to get into this, but what
we don't have to. We
don't want you to put you in a difficult position, but I'm trying to figure out some way.
See ARB minutes attached for their comments and concerns or something. I mean, we can. Yeah. That's fine. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just something that occurred to me as a potential way of getting the information in a publicly accessible place so that other people might grab it should they be interested.
Well, now our meetings are public too, so they can watch them. They can watch them. We can send them the videos. I mean.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what we could do. We could alert the State Preservation Office. You might want to watch the ARB meeting tonight. We're going to discuss something and whether or not we should put comments to the Board of Supervisors.
Mark Como would be overjoyed to hear he needs to sign on at 6:30 at night and watch our meeting minute. meeting.
This is true. This is true.
I don't know if
Now I
he'd be
can
very
send
happy
him-
about today's meeting, considering how he was his letter was talked about.
But now I can send it to him once they're uploaded, and within 10 days I can send them the link to the meeting. So
Yeah.
it's an option.
So anyway, the other thing that came across is a good idea. Somebody commented that project architects, project owners go through all sorts of reviews with their local jurisdictions, in our case, the ARB. But the person who's not at the table when all those discussions take place is the contractor. And they said, a lot of things can go awry because the contractor isn't privy to the discussions or the specific details that were put into the plans or specs or the certificate of appropriateness or whatever, the sign off that Laura gives to these drawings. And that is a material weakness because there's no communication. Mr. Kalinsky has often counseled us to not use the phrase or equivalent. In contractor speak, that means whatever you can buy at Home Depot, I think. And so the level of precision in dealing with historic buildings or new construction in historic district is something to work at. Anyway, one of the suggestions was that for each approved project, we assign a project monitor to represent the ARB's interest and be a point of contact for the homeowner or the contractor as work progresses. And that's something that we might consider at some point, doing something like that. It also allows us to keep tabs on things as work is ongoing. Just something to think about. Anyway, those are the ideas that I came away with from the National Alliance of Preservation Commission sections that I attended. I did not do 100% of them. And Denise, Nicole, do you have anything you might want to add, or Samantha?
I hadn't thought to write a thing, but yeah, there was a ton of good information, and I think you touched on a lot of it. And it was interesting and really heartening to see what other jurisdictions are doing, especially like kind of the bigger ones like San Antonio and Nashville that have their own historic preservation department and what they're capable of doing, and how it's not just kind of like development review or kind of what's getting shoved across our desk, but they're very proactive, obviously surveying, but then they've got these other programs that involve, the preservation of affordable housing and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really great conference all around and lots of good information.
Yeah, I ended up a little jealous of the amount of money some jurisdictions spend on this topic compared to the amount that Fairfax County spent.
I will say,
Arlington County, for instance, won an award.
To be fair, I mean, our resident curator program, I feel like, is something to be lauded, even though it isn't the CLG. We do have some things that, but you are right. If you look at our county's GDP and look at how much money we get, it's kind of shocking. But I recently saw the most recent notice about that, and so that's at least heartening that we will spend money on some of our historic buildings or put initiatives into them if they're county owned or operated, I suppose.
Yeah. And I will point out that both the resident curator and the new grants for the Gum Springs stuff are all courtesy of Denise. So Denise, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's only been 5 years of our life working on those, but yeah, you're right. Working on resident curator program.
Okay, so you might want to think about, Denise, submitting that for an award from the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions for next year as a model program.
I will talk to David Bukta and Stephanie Langton, who are now in charge of that program.
But that's, why not? I think Christopher is exactly correct, is that if we do things that are laudable, we should make sure that we blow the trumpet to laud them.
I'm serious, John. I will definitely talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. That was all I had. And that is the end of the agenda. I believe I would entertain, unless there's someone else.
I have one more thing. Okay, so very quickly, and we'll bring this to you next month, is we're still working on the Judicial Center master plan. I should have put this on the agenda, about heritage resources and things like that. And I just wanted to bring to your attention a comment from Jason Sutphin a couple months ago about possibly creating a historic overlay district around the historic courthouse and jail. And that's something that staff is hoping to bring forward and try to get some traction with. So I wanted to throw that out there to you to be considering. We're trying to finish up our heritage resources memo in the next week. And I will say there's been some encouraging progress thanks to our team trying to get some more green space and some other wayfinding and things like that to make it work better with the city of Fairfax. But just please be aware if that comes up, we're probably going to lean on the ARB a little bit for support.
Okay. Any further updates on the proposed 10-story building right behind the courthouse? That's in Fairfax City?
Denise, do you know? I don't. From what I hear every time, it seems like every week they come in with a different proposal, a modified proposal. But it's still 9 stories. The last we heard. I don't know if there's been an update since then.
I think at the meeting on Wednesday, they mentioned that it may not be moving forward as quickly because of finances, just because of the pandemic. I don't think it's anything official, but that's what was mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
It's still in pre-application. There's been no formal submission for it with Fairfax City yet. So we're kind of just at the very, very beginning of that, which is why their design keeps changing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That be the case, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
A motion to adjourn is always what's the phrase? Always in order. And so all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 I won't ask for any nays. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Aye.
One.